Book 3. Hell is empty, and all the devils are here. William Shakespeare, The Tempest. Prologue. Hope. Isaiah Taylor stumbled through snowfall. He stopped and bent over, resting his hands on his knees, willing his heart and lungs to calm and recover. His uniform still held a heavy perfume of kerosene and petrol. The poisonous cocktail wafted up into his nose. Isaiah gagged and spat. He knelt, listening to the wind whipping the trees, gusting and spinning snow into drifts against the trunks. While his breath evened out and his pulse steadied, he looked back at the black and grey world the night brought on. His footprints were diminishing as tumbling snow filled them. He could not say for certain if the coming monster's methods of tracking were the same he would use to hunt down prey, but he could hope. Hope in one hand, shit in the other. See which one fills up first. Mama had looked on Papa with reproof when he said it. As the visual dawned on Isaiah's baby sister, she began bawling with laughter. Papa smiled. I ain't suggesting against hoping. Hope all you want, but know it's a hollow word if you don't fill it up. You best put some fierce deeds behind hoping and praying, because without action, neither of those sentiments gonna get you a damn thing. A keening howl ripped the night and sent a shiver through Isaiah. If whatever beast had sounded off was hunting him, maybe it did not need to see tracks in snow to run down prey. Scent alone might turn him out. He stood, then froze, when a black shape exploded out of the snow-capped evergreens, racing full speed, careening straight toward him. As Isaiah tried to dodge, he tripped. The Red Maiden's saber slipped from his grasp and vanished in the snow. Isaiah spun onto his back, too late to stop the assault. Then Black Betty stood over him, straddling his chest with her forepaws, breath heaving in and out, pink tongue finding his face and smothering him with wet kisses. Isaiah tried to fight her off, but she ducked her forehead and found his, pressing gently but insistently into him until he relaxed enough to push back into her warmth and accept her greeting. She licked him again, then stood and looked into the night, tongue lolling. Isaiah wiped his face and scratched her broad chest roughly. Goddamn, girl. Missed you too. Black Betty's hot breath steamed out of her mouth. As he stood, she bowed her chest and wagged her tail, inviting him to play. She quickly saw that he was perhaps not in the mood. She circled him, sniffing at his ankle. He looked down as he rubbed her ears and realized she had caught the scent of fresh blood when he saw the dark stain beside his boot. Ah, fuck. As they bent and felt around for the cold steel of the German saber, he picked it up and stood gingerly on the bad leg. Fucking lion might have saved me once, but them scratches still likely to be the death of me. He looked at Betty. She walked a few steps and glanced at him over her shoulder. She looked into the night, then turned again to see if he intended to follow. Isaiah gritted his teeth and pressed on after her. Whatever was howling for blood out there in the storm would not catch him sitting and waiting to be taken, lacerated ankle or no. Francois led Caitlin and Adolphe from the woods onto a snow-covered road. He had honed his sense of direction on the savannah of Senegal, mapping routes for French canals, then helping chart a course for the railway from Dakar to the Niger River in French Sudan. Even in this foreign land, he trusted his way-finding ability. Francois looked back past Adolphe and Caitlin, searching for pursuit. Nothing. If anything was out there, it hunted in silence. Come, It should not be far now, Francois said. Caitlin was too spent to reply with words. She nodded and followed in his quickening steps. Adolf Hitler understood come. It was close enough to German for there to be little trouble translating what the big African meant. He trailed Caitlin close on her heels. Her head was bent against the falling snow, her shoulders hunched tightly, arms folding Isaiah's shotgun to her chest in a death grip. Adolf looked beyond her to Francois, leading the way, cutlass in hand. He found himself fervently wishing he had a weapon of any sort. The fact he failed to take a Mauser from the rifle rack in the Riekval tunnel when he had the opportunity gnawed at him. But then he recalled he had still been happy to be blind then. It would have struck the others as odd if the blind boy grabbed a rifle when the time came to run. Adolf pondered again the things that the demon in the barbed wire imparted to him in their brief, bizarre exchange. It could not have been more than a few seconds before Wolfgang Strothmann shut the thing up with the butt of his rifle. But in Adolf's recall of the moment, it seemed the dead man's whispers transported him. They were seated together in the dark of a sleek, modern cinema in Berlin. His hands, resting on the red velvet armrests, were his hands, but older, the lines and wrinkles accentuated by time. The scrawniness of war in their past, they were now soft, pink, plump, and manicured. Adolf realized he was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit and tie affair, nicer than anything he had ever owned in his life. It fit like a glove, and as he inhaled, he felt his posture rise to meet the fit of the suit. The clothes made the man. The demon sat beside him. But now he was a smiling fat man, not a drowned German foot soldier. On the screen before them, tens of thousands of soldiers stood in rank and file. And there he was. Adolf shuddered with a burst of pride when he saw himself on the screen, 3 stories tall, stern and strong-seeming, watching as his vast cavalcade of warrior sheep in grey wool marched past in rigid goose step, all of them fervently saluting, arms held out, straight and erect, like a field of stiff grey cocks. And Adolf filled with joy. His mother and Papa would be so proud. Papa would never smack around a man that all-powerful and mighty. The fat man squeezed his arm. He raised a hand, snapped pudgy fingers, and the film froze on an image of Adolf, fists on hips, looking particularly imposing. Adolf shot a sharp look at the demon. He was having a grand time. He very much wanted the film to keep playing. The fiction it created was as wonderful a thing as he could imagine. Our time is short, friend. I want you to know 3 things, said the fat man. Adolf nodded, impatient. Yes, what? The fat man patted Adolf's arm, patronizing. Number 1, you must get away from Captain Strothmann. If you do not, he'll be the end of you, and we can't have that. Adolf swallowed. The big captain definitely cut an imposing figure. 2, when you get past the wire, run straight for the woods. The Senegal, and that comely little Irish nurse will find you there. Go with them. Leave a trail, if you can. We don't find you before morning. When the time is right, I sure would appreciate it if you killed them in their sleep. Fat Man smiled and drew a finger slowly across his neck. Kill 'em both dead. Adolf bit back fear. As much as Wolfgang Strothmann intimidated him, the big African was twice as terrifying. But he thought he might be able to summon the courage to slit his throat while he slept. Number 3. If you do those 2 simple things, all the glory you see on this screen will be yours for eternity, friend. The fat man snapped his fingers again, and the film jumped and played on. And Adolf was a pig in shit as his infantry and cavalry stamped past the grand viewing stand, rigid and automaton, all individualism stripped, ready to commit every crime Adolf could think of, willing to let every crime of cowardice and weakness Adolf ever committed be forgotten, as he wrote a new myth, with himself at the heart of its tortured fiction. Then Wolfgang Strothmann cut it all violently short, caving in the demon's skull with his Mauser's steel butt plate. Adolf had roused and followed the demon's advice, escaping the barbed wire, and Wolfgang then finding himself found by the African and the Irish girl. Now he just needed to find a way past the cutlass and the shotgun to kill them with his bare hands. The odds seemed bleak, but if the fat man was to be believed, their deaths would earn him a kingdom, crown, and scepter to wield in any ways he saw fit. A bit of Irish and Senegalese blood spattered on his hands seemed a small price to pay. Donnie McMaster was fucking lost. He had the whole of the French frontier before him to escape into, but he could not for the life of him decide which path he ought to take. All roads seemed to run straight to hell. He saw movement and his rifle flew up, taking aim. His index finger brushed the steel trigger, settling it against it instinctively. Pressure applied. A squeeze began, smooth and practiced, just like his uncles showed him in the Mississippi woodland. But before he triggered the explosion, he stopped. Finbar Kelly's hands, the right one still wrapped in bloody cotton, shot up in surrender. "No, it's me! It's Finn!" Donnie lowered the rifle and took a step toward the Irishman. Then the same howl that cut Isaiah's courage vibrated through the hollow. "Oh, Lord, where do we go?" whispered Donnie, a frenzy of terror building in him as he pictured a wolf at the head of the thousands of men coming after them. Finbar bit his lip, torn. He was not sure he wanted company. He had lost Caitlin and Francois's trail and abandoned hope of finding it before the hunters caught him. Donnie McMaster would either be an asset or a liability. A liability would get him killed. An asset, at this point, meant maybe Gimpy Donnie and his rifle would sacrifice themselves in a rearguard action, allowing Finbar to escape. Finn was not proud of his gift for cold calculation, but he was not ashamed enough to pretend it was not who he was. He was finding he could forgive himself for a lot of sins, even if he never professed them in the confines of a confessional to some mouldy priest. "This way," Finbar said. Without looking back, Finn charged into the woods, running southwest. He knew Donnie would accept the invitation. He had pegged Donnie from the jump as a follower. Finbar Kelly was a keen judge of character. The little boy sat on the stoop with his wolf's empty rope leash, gazing out at the shimmering dunes. The old woman came out on the porch and wiped her hands on her apron. She stood behind the little boy and set her fists on her hips. "Dog ain't come back yet?" she asked. The boy stared down at the raw wooden steps, sullen. "You looking worried," she said. "Ain't?" The boy fiddled with the leash. "Going to get her," he mumbled. "What's that you say? Going to get her?" "No, you ain't. You get your little butt back inside." He shot her a contemptuous glare. "Child, you best mind yourself. Don't invite no trouble in that you don't want keeping you company. You hear?" He stood without looking at her and brushed past her into the diner. "Whew, about ready to put that leash on you, boy. Can't get no good help these days." The little boy stalked through the roadhouse. At the bar, the fat man contentedly devoured his meal. The boy stopped in the middle of the room, face flushed with impotent rage. He squeezed the rope leash in his hands, feeling the prickly hemp stab his palms. He wondered where his lupine friend was now. Having more fun than he was, certainly. The crone had not come back inside, and was no longer on the front porch. The fat man seemed lost in consumption. The little boy glanced at the back door. The old maxim, "Forgiveness is easier granted than permission," rung in the boy's ears. He quietly headed for the exit. The fat man heard the boy leaving, but did not look back. He was pleased. He knew who was coming through the desert toward him now. With the boy and crone absent, he was just as happy to make his next move in private. The back door shut silently. When the fat man finally turned and looked over his shoulder, no sign of the boy remained. The little boy awoke, covered in snow. The body creaked and groaned into motion as he bent it to his will. This was the second corpse he had ventured into since he went from the French child into the chaplain to kill that meddlesome Russian bastard in the Talmud church. His failure to stop the others there while they were still in disarray earned him mockery and punishment. He was back in the game now, determined to make the most of it. Redemption awaited. He stood and stretched, then looked down at his naked, petroleum-charred flesh. He found himself quite pleased by the horror of it all. Anyone whose last sight was this burnt monster coming out of the dark to savage them would die in terror. He picked up the broken, charred lance that struck down good Dr. Halstead and tested the weight of it. Still sufficient for throwing, outstanding for thrusting and stabbing, killing and maiming. He stretched his chest again and smiled as he took in the black flow of the San Quentin Canal, which had so recently been a firestorm. The Red Maiden's failure was twice as ignominious as his. At least the Russian was out of the way. Now a true competition was afoot. The little boy turned Dr. Philip Halstead's corpse away from the canal and scrambled it up the steep slope, guarding it on a southerly bearing, privately hoping to find his pet on the way. The thrill of the hunt thrummed inside him.